It's another Golf R video. I am on the road to E85 in this thing, so I have a Autotech internals upgrade kit for my high pressure fuel pump on the way somewhere between California and here, likely on a brown truck. And I just installed the Innovate Motorsports ethanol gauge and sensor combo kit. And what you're about to experience is a very detailed look at that installation. I know a lot of people are sort of nervous about this because there's reports of leaking and fuel lines being blown off. I will show you every tip I can come up with as I go through this process. So hopefully this helps folks. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, I did create an Instagram for this car because I know you guys like that kind of thing. Go.fast.r. I know what you're saying. Is it go.fast.r or is it go faster? Yes, it's both of those. So go hit me up on Instagram if you want to see like that kind of stuff. Roll the tape. All right, first thing we're going to do is pull the fuse for the fuel pump. That way we can get rid of some of that pressure and we can also hopefully let some fuel settle in the line. So pull that number 10 fuse, and then what I'm going to do is go in and just start the car and let it run for a couple of minutes. It actually took a couple minutes and it just died. As soon as it dies, you're out of fuel. Go ahead and remove the battery. A lot of people don't think about this, but the proper way to remove a battery is with the negative terminal first and then the positive terminal. That prevents opportunities for you to accidentally short circuit. And then when you put the battery back on, you put it back positive first and then negative. So I am removing the air intake just because it's going to make it a little bit easier for the video. You don't necessarily have to do that, but getting the battery out of the way will be helpful. Besides, you want to disconnect the battery anyway, working on the high pressure fuel system. All right, so I'm going underneath the dash and pulling out this panel. You can see there are 2 Torx screws, and it's just sort of clipped in the back, and it pulls straight forward once you, or I guess straight backwards, once you get those Torx bolts out. And then there is a grommet in the firewall. And this is a DSG car, a left-hand drive. Your mileage may vary. There is a grommet. I just don't know exactly what it looks like or where it is, but you can see where mine is. I pulled off the side panel, and now I'm taking out that cubby. Squeezing the 2 side panels will allow that to happen. All right, so I'm shoving a coat hanger through that grommet I already showed you into the engine compartment, and it's basically piercing the grommet, the rubber, as it does that, and you can see where it pops out there in the engine compartment. So I'm sort of shoving it up at a 45-degree angle. Now I'm working to make sure that I have it in the position I want, because when I feed the wires back through, I don't want to have to move wires around. So all I'm doing is folding it back on itself with the cable for the gauge in there, sort of with about a foot tail or something like that, and I'm dragging it back through. Now when you drag it back through to the inside, you are going to have to sort of either tear or cut the rubber a little bit to get that connector through, and then just route it the way you want it up into that corner. And that's pretty much how I did it right here, is just routing it around. Now let's put the gauge inside the cubby. I think this is a great idea because I don't need to see ethanol content all the time. What I'm using is a 3D printed mount. I found this online. I'll put links to all this stuff in the video description. This is a really cool idea. I had a buddy of mine print it in ABS plastic, and it's weird. It sort of looks like it wants to tilt up, but what I found on the cubby position, it works better if it tilts in. So you can play with that. Just know that I ended up with mine finally going tilted in. It fits in there nice and snug, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to sort of temporarily, maybe permanently, hold it in place. But yeah, it's just got a little foot there that will sit in the cubby. Now I'm going to drill a hole in the back for the wires. I like using a step bit for this kind of stuff. It's easy to just increase sizes. It cuts through plastic like butter, and I can just sort of slowly go and just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until the hole is big enough that plug can fit through there. And once that happens, I can feed all those wires through. These loose wires, it's easier just to fold them in half and then shove them through as a bunch. And then you've got these 2 pigtails, which I'm not going to use. You most likely won't need to either. If you do need to use them, you'll know that. And yeah, that just sits right there. So now to mount it, I thought about a couple things. A dab of epoxy or some sort of adhesive. I decided to use these command strips. I stole them from my wife. And they're really basically thin, rubbery double stick tape. And it allows me to get things sort of held into place without being necessarily permanent in case I decide to change it up. But actually, it fits really well in holding that gauge inside the housing. It's a very solid fit. It's almost like it just shims it just enough with tacky stuff, and it doesn't want to move. The base, a little bit to be desired. I could have used, I usually normally use like a 3M automotive double stick tape, but I felt like it was too thick for this application. So all I really need to do is just keep it from bouncing around. So I think it's fine. It almost like press fits in there anyway. You do have to give a little bit of room to squeeze the side of the cubby though to put it back in. So it's pushed all the way to the side here, but that's going to change. Now, in the fuse box, I already have a fuse for my dash cam, so I wanted to find a new place. That's in the cigarette lighter adapter. And so, yeah, I started doing some testing with a test light. And what I found is there's actually a empty fuse spot that is on only when the ignition's on. So first I'm testing, I find the bar that's on when the ignition's off. And look at this guy right here. It is empty. And when I turn the ignition on, check it out, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Boom, we have power. So I was like, what fuse is that actually? And why is there nothing in there? And so I checked the fuse diagram, and sure enough, that fuse right there is 48 on my car. I can't tell you about your car, and it says not used. Well, guess what? I'm going to use it because that is like free fuse space right there. All right, so here's something that didn't work quite as I planned, and that is with this dimmer circuit on the Innovate gauge. And so I'll tell you, I tried to connect it up to the headlight wire off of the headlight switch, which is the gray wire in the 10 position, is what everybody says. And I did get it to work. It actually dimmed when that lights were on, but it only dims like a very small amount, and it's not consistent. Like for some reason, that wire is not putting out 12 volts consistently. So I don't know exactly what the right solution is. If anybody has the answer, let me know. But even when it did dim, it didn't really make that big of a difference. So, and the fact that this is in a cubby anyway, I don't really need it to dim because it's not going to be visible like 90% of the time. So I scrapped the whole dimmer white wire part of this install. And I just don't feel comfortable sharing the information because it just wasn't consistent. So yeah, if you've got a solution for the dimmer circuit on the Innovate gauge, I don't know if it's a gauge problem specifically or if it's the wire that I chose, that gray wire, which does the test light shows on and off with the headlights, but it's not a consistent voltage. It's enough to light the test light, but it's not consistent in voltage to dim the Innovate gauge. So I don't know what's going on there. Let me know if you've got any ideas. So I'm skipping that part. Sorry. All right, so now I'm going to build the rest of the wiring harness. And there are a few wires I'm going to need. So first of all, the white wire, that is for the dimming circuit. That's the one I'm going to connect to that pigtail. I have some really good ratcheting crimpers, and I have no idea where they're at. I think somebody borrowed them and forgot to give them back. Anyway, the yellow wire and the brown wire are not used for this application. It's one of those things, again, if you know you need the brown wire and the yellow wire, you know what to do with those. They're not necessarily if you're just installing the gauge by itself with the sensor. So I am taping those off, isolating them, and then taping them off so that they're sort of out of the way. I don't necessarily want to cut them because maybe one day my installation will dictate using those, basically external signal wires. So yeah, I don't need them right now. All right, so now we're left with the red wire, the black wire, the white wire, which I already put a spade on, and that little connector, which plugs into the actual sensor. All right, so black wire's ground, so I'm gonna put a little ring terminal on it, and I'm gonna use a little bolt at the fuse box for ground. So that's easy peasy. Ring terminal, crimp. All right, and then the red, I'm going to use a fuse tap into that empty location. And so I've got a fuse tap for that. Unfortunately, This is a huge tap for such a tiny wire, but it'll work. You just got to get it. I usually fold all my little small wires over so they get a good grip, and just like that. And then this, we're putting a 5 amp fuse in the top part of that fuse tap, which is the line for the wire that's coming out. Now, there is a correct way to put these on and an incorrect way to put these on. I will make sure I cover that with you. So the ground wire is going to go up here. I have a couple of bolts here. One of them is already being used for the camera ground, so I just figured I'd use the other one for this. Plugging in the harness, which goes through the firewall to the actual sensor. Now for the power source. Remember, I'm going into that spot that I found that wasn't in use. The wire needs to come down in this. You need to, the power side, the part that's providing 12 volt power, comes from the opposite foot as the wire coming. And in this case, it's the top. So you feed it that way and so that's important. We can talk about that later if you have any questions, but make sure you know which direction those fuse taps go in, because you can run them accidentally in series as opposed to in parallel, and it basically puts all of the voltage and load through the fuse, the main fuse. So anyway, yeah. So I'm bundling up all my wires, making sure everything fits in there nicely, and I can move and open the cubby okay. Yeah, so just takes a little bit of finagling, and we get it in there. And yeah, finagling's a real word. Now that bottom panel can go in, and I'll just put that back into place. I got the side panel in already. Now we go to the engine compartment. Pulling off the engine cover, and I've got this hose right here. This is our high pressure fuel line, and I'm just sort of lining up to see where I want to put this sensor. It's going to go right in the middle. Some of you already have a cut of hose with a junction, and mine's not. It's solid. So what I decided to do is put a mark at the middle of those two clips, because that's a perfect, it gives me about a 1/2 inch extra line on each side than what I specifically need, which gives me a little room, a little wiggle room. So once I marked it, I'm going to cut it. There is going to be some fuel in here. It's probably not pressurized. It's been sitting for a little while, but it will have a little bit of fuel in it. So make sure you get something to catch that. I'm just using regular scissors. You can get a special cutting tool for this or use a razor blade, but you know, decent scissors will cut it fairly well. So measure twice, cut once. So I just did a double check to make sure I'm on the right page, and yeah, cut that to the length. Now, when it comes to connecting to this sensor, you have a 3/8 inch metal, and then you've got your 5/16 inch hose. You need to find a way to bridge the gap between those. And this is where I think people run into problems, is they don't use right size components, and they try and do things that shouldn't be done. 3/8 inch steel to 5/16 inch hose. Now, these are quick connects. They've got these little plastic inserts in there, and I'll show you how these work so that you can make sure you get them on. But when you plug them in, there's an O-ring in there, but you need to make sure they get clipped all the way around. There is that barb, I'll call it, that little lip that they catch on. And to pull it off, you just squeeze the sides of that plastic. But you can see there's those little tabs that get stuck behind that lip. And that's what holds everything together. So if people are having problems with these popping off, it's because they don't have those pressed all the way on to get past that little lip which holds it. And if you want to pull it off, you can use a little screwdriver to pull it off, and it's going to go on, and you can see it clicks in fairly positively, and then you can put the quick connect on, and it will click in fairly positively. So you don't need to take them apart, just slide them on and make sure they click in all the way, and I think that's important. Now, as far as connecting the hose to that, there's a couple options. This is what's called high pressure fuel clamp, and a high pressure hose clamp, and you can get these at the auto parts store in bulk. These are 13 millimeter, and it goes 13 to 15 is the range. They're 15 open and then 13 closed, and that's a good range. And I'm using a 7 millimeter socket just to show you. Do not use these worm clamps. I know people do it and they get away with it, but you can't get them as tight. They sort of wreck the hose. These with the bolt, the high pressure fuel clamp, are much better options. They have much better clamping. So my hose is 14.5, which is why a 13 to 15 works out well. Now here's the option I plan to use, and this is my preferred option. These are Oetiker clips or single ear clips, and you can see here 12.8 to 15.3, basically 13 to 15, the same size as those other clamps. You get the clamps in the right size. Now here's the problem. A lot of people get this tool, which is the clamp tool for this. Like, you buy this, it's for this, but look how small they are. It's really hard to get good leverage on these. In a pinch, they say you can use side cutters like this. Same problem though, they're really tiny. They don't put even pressure on it. And then I've got these like bull nose cutters, and again, they're just not ideal. You can do it. Some people are successful. Some people have a hard time getting them tight enough. This is my tool of choice right here. This is a ratcheting crimper. Look how long it is. Look how much leverage I can get. And it ratchets and gets all the way tight and doesn't release until you get it squeezed all the way tight. So these are amazing. You set the ear inside there, and then you start to tighten it. I'll burn one of these for you so you can see. And once that ratchet engages, it's just going to keep ratcheting until it gets to the end, and then it will release. Once that happens, you can see you've got a pretty solid clamp. Now, obviously, there's no hose in there, so it's going to look a little different, but that's the way to go. If you're going to use Oetiker clamps or single ear clamps, get a ratcheting. I know it costs money, but get a ratcheting crimper. So pushing these through, again, 3/8 inch to 5/16 inch barb because it's a 5/16 inch holes. And then I'm just getting these lined up sort of so that they'll sit on top. It should look really nice and OEM. That's a similar OEM style clamp other than the spring clamps. And then I just clip it on there and then ratchet, like super easy. Done. Go into the other one. These are never coming off. I mean, unless I cut them off. Make sure the hose is pushed all the way on, and clamp your clamp in a way that holds the barb. And then once I get this in place, it just clips into those existing clips. I know people will try and do weird things like epoxy them or cut them and zip tie them. I don't know, mine just fits right in there and holds it securely. So you might try that. Just give it a little push. Mine fits in there really snug, and it looks like it was built for that. All right, so I am taping with cloth wiring loom tape the connector cable. I normally use Tessa tape. That's my preference. I didn't have any Tessa tape. I got this stuff, which is different. Tessa tape is what your car's like OE wrap is. This is a cloth tape. It's good. It's protective. It looks nice, but Tessa tape is the real stuff. So I'm popping this little clip cover thing off on the rail where the wires are coming through, and then there's a couple of empty spots there. So what I'm doing is integrating with the existing wiring so it looks like it belongs. And I'm clipping that in there, and then you can see here, I'll just pop this back into place. Hopefully you saw how I did that. A little screwdriver down from the top and a little twist, and it will pull out. And then now I'm removing the existing zip tie off of this big wiring loom, which is Tessa tape, by the way. That's the Tessa tape stuff. This is a little bit different that I'm using on this car. But anyway, another zip tie, now zip tying those together. So again, they sort of look like they belong. They stay secure. You can see I'm running my line basically underneath the intake and then over to the battery tray, connecting it with the other wiring harness there. And then I also found that there is a spot on the battery tray that allows me, there's a little slot there that allows me to go in and zip tie to that. So everything is secured. It's not free and loose. And my extra is going to be just hanging out right there next to the battery, which you won't be able to see anyway unless you remove the battery. Speaking of, yeah, let's put this thing back together. Don't forget to put your fuel pump fuse back in. And then, yeah, reverse order, put everything in. Again, battery positive first, then negative. I don't know if anybody told you that or not, but it's a good habit to get into. And then there you go. Power, look at that. 10.4, 10.5, which is what you'd expect out of gas, and you can see the cubby, check my ethanol, and then I'm good to go. Anyway, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.